Good evening. My name is Mio Nanjo, Senior Advisor of Mori Art Museum. This forum started in 2013, inviting stakeholders and experts in urban design, science and technology, innovation, art and design for exchange of opinions. And this has become a very unique platform. And this every year it has been held, and this is going to be the 8th this year. Every time we have set up topics for discussion, and this year there has been the COVID-19 pandemic, which has given an impact on all over the world. And disregarding this issue, we will not be able to have a meaningful discussion. So with post-COVID or with the COVID era, we have set up a topic for discussion from today through 27th. We are going to have discussion online based on the topic of pandemic and innovative city, art and science session, and brainstorming session, art and science session. These three will comprise the session. And today we are going to have the first day of the art and science session. In art and science session, we are dividing the stream of discussion into three: understanding, mutually understanding, and creation. These are the topics for three discussion sessions. In the more technical words, cognition, understanding, or sympathy, and collaboration. And these are the topics for discussions going forward. In each section, different experts and people will have 2 sessions of discussion. So in total, there will be 6 discussions in a series. Please refer to the program for further details. This year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, online communication has become a scene of normal daily life, and virtual has become very closer to real, and significance of things has started to change, as well as the priority of things or events have started to change. COVID-19 has segregated us, and activities and exchanges have been restricted, and we believe that there have been change in the significant of events and things. On the other hand, environmental issues or AI or robotics, biotechnology, these emerging technological developments are making the reality surrounding us more evident for us. So the real nature of these reality around us has become more evident than ever. Using science and technology and art as a clue, what significance of a phenomenon called the pandemic carries for culture and the society, how we can overcome this, and people to people, or people and information, and diversity and the divide, and science, technology, and culture, and are competing each other and the cities. So we'd like to have an active exchange of opinions concerning new potential of cities. And we have appointed a moderator for each 3 breakout sessions. For today and tomorrow, where we will discuss the understanding, media artist Akihiro Kubota is going to moderate. And for mutually understanding, Asa Ito will moderate, and George Kunihiro, architect, will moderate the discussion on creation. And today we have invited Kubota-san as the moderator, and Kubota-san is the professor of art and media course, Department of Information Design of Tama Art University, who is the director of Art Archive Center. Could you please have the floor, Kubota-san?
Good evening. Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Nanjo. So with this, Innovative City Forum 2020 is made online. Usually only 3 days, but it is extended into 2 weeks. That means we will be able to be given an opportunity for continuous discussion. It is going to be a very important moment. First of all, art and science and breakout session. I would like to share with you the overview, because this is supposed to be the very first day. So, today, as has been introduced, the pandemic is a big issue, and that is going to play the key word. Another key word which is going to be important and for this breakout session is the human perception, as you can see in the slide. For instance, when it comes to art, as you can see, recognition and cognition and invisible reality. If that is going to be the one given to the human beings, then that is going to serve as a pillar in order to address COVID-19 and the pandemic. This is going to be the big topic for the 3 breakout sessions. And based on that, today and tomorrow, I will going to serve as the moderator. Those are the sessions are going to be moderated by me, Nanjo-san, and the staff. I talked with them. So we decided to focus on the topic of new conditions for understanding the world for this first day breakout session. What would be the right condition for understanding the world? That is going to be the topic we are going to focus on today. As has been mentioned, the perceptions, they are extremely important for us. That is because perception is biologically, biological behavior. At the same time, perception is closely linked with the human language, and on top of that, politics, society. All those things are being linked with our perception. Therefore, it is quite elusive in some sense. And depending on the time and the world, it is subject to enormous changes. And through perception, we grasp the external world, and that is our biological feature. In this particular world, with the advancement of technology, and on top of COVID-19, we are now currently living through the online communication. Under these circumstances, how we are going to recognize the others, that is going to be one of the starting points for our discussion. In society, as you may know, as captured in this photo, elsewhere in the world, there are things that are not understandable by people. There are a lot of divisions that do exist. Under these circumstances, we have to empathize with other people. How will we be able to? Is it going to be achievable? That will going to be the starting point. At least by doing so, we will not be able to address this huge and gigantic topic. This is the reason why we decided to pick up understanding the world as our theme. And this is the art and science session. Therefore, we are going to look into understanding in the first place, and then related to the perception I was talking about, it is closely linked with aesthetics and technology. Therefore, for today's session, these are going to be the words that I need to skillfully moderate in this topic. Today, and based on this kind of understanding, we have invited 3 speakers. First speaker, a professor of the Graduate School of Economics, Nagoya University, a teacher teaching at Graduate School of Economics, Professor Sayaka Oki, and Professor Futoshi Hoshino, Assistant Professor of Waseda University. And the third speaker is New Dark Age, was the name of the book he authored. And I was fortunate to translate this book, and I struggled with that translation about a year ago. Now, the author of that book, Mr. James Bridle, is going to speak as the third speaker. They are all going to make presentations on this grand topic of understanding. So, without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Oki in to make the first presentation.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I am from the Graduate School for Economics of Nagoya University. I have been teaching the area of the history of science. I'm going to share with you the slide deck on the screen. Please wait. So this is a rather rigid kind of title of my presentation, Expertise on a Mutual Incomprehension. When we explore what understanding means, perhaps in a certain discipline or experts who have expertise in that area of discipline, an understanding is best done and realized by those experts in each discipline. But from me, I would like to talk about the dark side, or rather, well, those experts who do have the expertise in each discipline is not knowing or understanding each other. So, with expertise and a mutual incomprehension, I have been researching the history of science, and today we have had a discussion of why there has been a separation of natural science and non-STEM areas of studies, and natural sciences and other than natural science disciplines, or science, those areas which are thought to be or professed as sciences, and sciences or humanities or non-STEM, non-science, well, somewhat in the areas where you somewhat feel awkward in calling the discipline as science-based. So there are some differences in the disciplines. For example, it is too simplified, but on one side, humans are not reliable, trustworthy. Humans are the source of bias. On the other hand, there are some other people, schools, who think that human beings are the sources of values. On the left-hand side, symbolically, telescope. Picture of telescope is shown. And telescope is to assist the visual acuity of human beings. And in the astronomy, in modern times, not seeing the sky with your human eyes, but rather machines or the technological eyes are looking at the sky. So rather than machine or not by the one single person, perhaps a bulk observation is thought to be important, and generalization is thought to be important. On the other hand, there is a meaning in individuality. How people feel is the most important in other areas. For example, people are living independently to change in the order of the world. In the bottom right, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's the Contract Social. The picture of that book, authored by Rousseau, is shown here, and it is presenting the values of the people and creating the social order. So this is the area people believe that it is important for people to play an important role in changing the order of the society. But on the other hand, there are some other people who think that the people are not gods and not the center of the world. So these two areas are not mingling each other, and there is a clear, sharp difference on the left-hand side, and quantification to describe numerically would be nice. And that is the thought of the people on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, this is not appropriate, so you should use natural languages. These groups seem to be very diverse, and they are opposing each other, but we think it has been thought that these two groups are complementary to each other. And regarding this complementarity, in my opinion, well, disciplines are playing different roles, and from different viewpoints, they are looking at things. But they are cooperating each other. However, experts are not understanding each other. And then complementarity is not working there. Actually, the rank consciousness is sneaking in that. In the 18th century, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is known for his thought on education and how the disciplines or studies should be, tacitly, the disciplines of study have been regarded from the viewpoint of a rank consciousness. For example, very abstract principles are to be explored, and there are certain people who are good at exploration of abstract, or other people are good at individual specific things. And in his thought, women are the ones who are good at such individual specific exploration, and those who are good at applying the principles to the practical use. On the right-hand side, you see the simplified schematic. The male and female. Male are good at finding the principles, and those principles are applied to practical use by women, and discovery, assistance, generalized, specific. And these are typical view of those different genders. And in the somewhat like physics, discovering the principles, and people are saying that you are not doing much things about in the humanities, non-STEM areas, but finding the principles, and other people are manufacturing based on the principles discovered. So these two are mounting each other. And furthermore, there are many disciplines. This is prepared by the Ministry of Education in Japan, and I have summarized and organized the specific disciplines into several groups. There are a lot more than this, and you are seeing that the emerging number, like the humanities and social science and the complex or integrated humanities, and these three, utilizing the non-STEM as well as science and technology areas are utilized. So like this, the number of combinations and disciplines are increasing with the increased amount of information. And also there is an tacit ranking consciousness. What is so bad about the ranks? Well, in such a feeling, people tend not to trust each other. So trustworthiness is lost. And many things are accumulated, so it is giving rise to the difficulty in mutual understanding. This is a sad thing. When it comes to the lack of mutual understanding or lack of collaboration, in recent years, I wondered whether I should raise the example of COVID-19 pandemic, but I decided not to. A history of science and also the theories of the social theories of the science and technology. In these disciplines, or experts in those areas remember this very well. And perhaps for those in the science technology discipline, they memorize or recall this very clearly. Great East Japan earthquake and a nuclear power plant accident following the earthquake in 2011. And their collaboration in different disciplines didn't lead to the measures to be taken. This is one example. In 2009, in Heian era, in 869, there was the tsunami and a great earthquake called Jogan Great Earthquake. And such tsunami damage reached the inland area, and Fukushima nuclear power plant, which was crippled by the tsunami. And actually the tsunami in those days, 869 tsunami, reached the location where the nuclear power plant is located. With this knowledge, the nuclear power plant operators should have taken measures against the tsunami. And this was the research paper which included the recommendation for that, and including the history, geology, and seismology. And why this happened is not known yet, but the experts in the nuclear engineering was at a loss, and they couldn't reach the judgment that the knowledge about the disasters which took place 1,000 years ago to be utilized learning for the disaster prevention. This recommendation could not be accepted immediately by those experts in nuclear engineering because of perhaps the rank consciousness. But this recommendation was not prioritized, and that's why there has been a great damages. Even the experts could not utilize the valuable learnings. Perhaps there was a somewhat lack of a misunderstanding among different disciplines, not consistent in understanding. So that is the example that we have observed in the history. And I have talked about the experts. And recently, I think that many more people are more interested in this area, lay people versus experts. The general people or general public or ordinary persons and scientists are not able to communicate well to general people, or the people are not understanding what is happening in the global warming and so forth. There are many problems arising, and general public are not listening to what experts have to say. And in this area, I think this has been the problem for a while, and experts are not understanding or listening to what general people are saying. This happens a lot. For example, take the cancer patients. those parties having some difficulties, and such a local and specific in context, very accurate knowledge about the local situation. For example, patients with cancer get the anti-cancer agent administered into the body, and they are not able to eat. So they have their own knowledge, very accurate knowledge about their own bodies and conditions, but they are not heard by physicians when they see them. So it's not a generally accepted story. So this is just a specific patient's complaint. So these are not respected by physicians. I said that the local or specific context, the experts often disregard what ordinary people say. And the experts understand that was the error for them, and acknowledging that and taking up the specific knowledge of the parties or stakeholders. And those information and knowledge will be utilized in the research into the discipline. In recent years, patient groups have got together with physicians and nurses. Actually, physicians are not able to find detailed information, and that specific information is gathered by a group of patients, and they in turn provide such specific information to doctors. Certain group of experts in the context of specific context, and ordinary people gather information under their own specific situations and bring them to the experts, and that has been rising from the beginning of the 21st century. This is the new phenomenon. And what is happening as a problem in recent years? Well, the experts may make a mistake, and that from the end of the 20th century and towards the beginning of the 21st century, that is the view of the experts of the histories of science. And that's why they have come up with the measures for improvement. And ordinary people are not listening to what experts have to say. So this has become a bigger problem. Several years ago, the experts are not listening to what ordinary people have to say. That used to be the most problem. But now, the ordinary people are not listening to the scientific recommendation, for example, by the experts. And here, as you can see, as an example, coronavirus or COVID-19 is somewhat concocted by the media. So this is the rumor, speculation among the ordinary people. Even before COVID-19, there has been a series of problems. For example, in the area of global warming, people are not understanding it very well. So this is a well-known problem. In Europe, I'm going to use the following slide. In Europe, EC, European Commission, has been working on this issue very seriously, and a political decision, making a political decision. What are the grounds for people to make decision? And calling various experts, and they formulated a report. And this is the chart included in that report. And perhaps issues involving the values, and even with the evidence presented to them, people do not change their belief easily. Using this graph, for example, in some experiment, on the left-hand side, abortion, and second from the left, gay marriage, and a third from the left, immigration issue. And these issues, on the vertical axis, belief change. Even with various evidence presented, like the psychological test, various evidences are shown to those people responded, but there hasn't been much belief change. And red-colored ones are the political issues, are based on people's values, and non-red ones are non-political issues. For example, how much you know about Thomas Edison, and so forth. And those questions were asked. And there are things which are tended to change easily and others not. Through this investigation, looking at the response of the brain, it was very interesting research, and they researched into this. On the right-hand side, this is the report, JRC, which is a think tank of EC. Conclusion of this report, certain people are not accepting what the experts have to say, and that happens frequently. And experts who are very peculiar about accurateness. For example, when I talk, typically speaking, people tend to present a lot of data, but it is not conveyed well to ordinary people. But emotion or value or identity-based claims are easier to be communicated to many people. For example, this virus is dangerous in a video of capturing the healthcare professional was more effective than the release made by experts with a lot of data and graphs. In order for people to understand each other, communication based on the value and emotion will be more important. Then design and art are supposed to play important roles for realizing this. But as a researcher, I am interested in this. I hope that we can have discussion later on. If we do this too much, and this is similar to manipulation of people's minds, so I'm wondering whether there is any appropriate level of doing this. So with this, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, I would like to invite the next speaker, Assistant Professor Mr. Hoshino. May I? I am Hoshino. Thank you. Aesthetics is my expertise, and I study aesthetics, art, and philosophy, and across those two areas is my specialty. So the topic for today's session is understanding. So from the viewpoint of aesthetics, I would like to make some inputs. In particular, as has been introduced in the initial stage, COVID-19 is one of the background themes. Under these circumstances of infection, what kind of idea we have to apply with regard to understanding? What is the image that we grasp with regard to understanding? And I would like to look into the possibility of understanding. With regard to the topic, the concentration and distraction, two paradigms of embodied understanding. And this is the topic I have selected. I will come back into this topic later on. Now, in the interest of time, first and foremost, I would like to share with you the most important. There are three arguments here. The first one, what does it really mean, understanding? And I would like to categorize it and conceptualize that. I think Professor Kubota, who is the moderator, I think this is familiar to him. Lakoff and Johnson, as they described, categorization and conceptualization is going to be applied in order to define understanding. And from that viewpoint, I would like to use this term understanding in that way. The second point, and I think this is the first topic, big topic I would like to share with you, is that where the experience of understanding takes place. If I may jump to the answer, it is not in the brain, but in the body instead. The common understanding says that within the body, and according to some philosophical viewpoint, the experiencing that you understand outside the body instead of inside the body, inside the brain, which I will like to share with you with more details later on. And the third point is the concentration and distraction. If we talk about understanding, there are two models, concentration and distraction, how they are going to be subject to change going forward. And that is the topic for the latter part of my talk. So those are the three topics I'm going to share with you today. As has been mentioned now, coming back to the previous slide, first, the categorization and the conceptualization of understanding. According to Kant, it means understanding, I believe. This is the area that is controlled by the understanding in the terms of Kant. So the sensible data or sensual data is to be captured by sensibility. And on top of that, in an ordinary situation, we prioritize the brain. So this kind of understanding may take place in the brain. I think many people believe in that way. This is a kind of a common image, and that is a given with regard to understanding. But in my understanding, and from the viewpoint of cognitive science, I think conceptualization does not necessarily take place only in the brain. That kind of understanding is too dominant. That means, for example, in this way, you can interpret the situation. For example, if you try to understand something, that means it takes place inside the body, or not the body itself, as a result of the interactions with the environment, and that generates understanding. That kind of understanding is more dominant, as a matter of fact, and superior. So when it comes to the brain, it plays an important role in the process of understanding, but conceptualization does not automatically come out of the brain. There are different kinds of references. If I may cite one of them, about 5 years ago, or more than 5 years ago, Barbara Maria Stafford, who is an art historian, I translated her book. I will not go read it out, but as captured in this slide, this is the image that we have to follow. That means in the 1990s, the neuroscience focused on, as you may know, fMRI. That kind of technology was applied in order to localize the image in the brain. And that is the technique that was applied. But into the 21st century, neuroscience has departed from that. That means decentralization or delocalization. The brain is just one of them. So for our understanding and emotion, can be generated outside the brain. And I think that kind of the new direction that neuroscience is now pursuing in the 21st century. This is a book released by Tokyo University Publishing House. So I just would like to refer to this book. So now we sometimes give too much privilege to the brain, but at the same time, intuitive understanding. This kind of a model is based on this kind of a slide. That means our experiences tell us that if you understand something that has taken place outside the brain, our experiences tell that. That means, in other words, what is often said is that in front of the desk, you may concentrate yourself, but instead of that, while walking or taking a shower, a new idea may flash on your mind. I think you have experienced these things as well. Therefore, interaction with the external world will enable us to accumulate the concept of understanding. I think this shows one of the good examples. And if I may go too extreme in some sense, based on my own experience, for example, several years ago, I participated in intensive training workshop for contemporary dancing, and I was working on an essay on philosophy at the time. The quality itself was changed completely. So the physical practice made a great change into the brain work. This is the experience I did have. Therefore, this reinforces my conviction. And going to the latter half of my topic, I'm teaching at university. So this is something that I feel on everyday basis. Across the world, in many countries, the classes are given online at universities. And those online lessons, for example, many students and sit at the computer in their houses and accessing the Zoom to listen to their lectures. I think many of them do so, but on the other hand, I think I can also observe a limited number of students who are out in the city or on the beach. So destructive environment, and they are using the iPhone to be connected to the online instruction. It is not limited to university classes, but seminars and workshops and webinars, they are being provided online or on the hybrid way. I think we have to take time to think about the meaning of those things. In the past, when we say we understand something, concentration was considered important. I think that is a kind of a prejudice that was given. You have to concentrate on anything, any thought. So if I may use a traditional model, the center is located in the brain. So that kind of a concentration is essential. That was the conventional thinking. But in reality, what we are witnessing in reality is not like this kind of a concentration model. I think some of the people listening that have joined this meeting are in the concentration mode, and some others in distraction. So this kind of inattentiveness or distraction, you can also understand something. I think that kind of a new model is now being demanded in light of, well, the reason why I came to this kind of argumentation is not because of the COVID-19, but in the past, for many years. For example, the smartphone can be used on the occasion of viewing artworks at museums. Several years ago, I took up this topic and to study into them. Claire Bishop, who is the art historian, she wrote a very interesting book. This is a quotation. The audience at museums are not the concentration work, the viewing the artworks on the concentration mode. Instead, the smartphones are used. So distractive mode, so to speak. And some people may say they are not a good way. But it is ethically judged whether when it comes to concentration and distraction. But they have to be revisited. That's what she is arguing in her own book. This is the quotation, and if you read it out, for example, the digital detox or over dependence on a smartphone, that kind of a distraction is not something good. So concentration carries a market value, and so the distraction means something bad. That kind of a dichotomy is a method that was taken by the whole society as a culture. But that is not the case anymore. Concentration and distraction can coexist with each other. In such an environment, there are going to be new ways of understanding that will be created. I think indirectly, we have come to this kind of understanding. In fact, in reality, this is something unavoidable, in fact, in the new world of COVID-19. Therefore, from this kind of viewpoint, concentration and distraction, this kind of a dichotomy centering on those two words, concentration, distraction. Instead of that kind of a dichotomy, we have to seek a pathway and to coexist those two things. And that is the topic I would like to share with you in my presentation. But that said, multitasking human beings in these days are going to be exploited by new liberalism. That means multitasking the capability of multitasking is idealized in modern society. This kind of a value set is being provided. I think this connotes that this has some political connotations, which I would like to share with you and discuss in the follow-up discussions. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Starting from, as Professor Oki mentioned, and two principle or dichotomy, which is easiness to understand. Is it going to be a good thing in reality? And this was the background for the first topic for discussion. So I hope we can have active discussion on this later. We would like to invite the third speaker, who is going to be the last presenter for today, James Bridle.
Please start your presentation. ジェームズ・ブライドルさんにプレゼンテーションをお願いしたいと思います。
We are going to have the presentation by James Bridle.
Okay, so ジェームズさんちょっと今。
I think he is offline and he is trying to get in again. We are waiting for him to come in.
Okay, James さん、reconnecting. So. Okay, please start your presentation, please, Mr. James. Hi,
James. Can you
hear me?
Please hold on a minute. We are talking to him. Perhaps not hearing.
I'm
sorry if I'm interrupting. I was asked to unmute, but I can't hear anything at all.
Okay, please start. Yes.
Hello. I'm sorry that there seems to be a problem with the audio, so I can't hear anyone else, which is a real shame. Those presentations look really fascinating, so I'm just very sorry I wasn't able to hear them. I'll just get on with my bit and we'll see how it goes. I'm very grateful for you asking me to speak. I hope this is interesting and useful. I also wanted to start by saying that I was intrigued by the introduction to the session, which said that something about looking at these questions of what we can know, what we can understand, and maybe taking cues from indigenous and potentially, I think, non-human ways of understanding and thinking. That's not what I was going to talk about now, but it is what I'm thinking a lot about at the moment, and in my new work. So maybe that will come up in the discussion afterwards. But I'll get on with what I was going to say. I was going to speak to kind of two aspects of knowledge and understanding that I've talked about in my work, and that are closely tied, as I see it, to issues of new technology. I'm British, so I talk about the weather a lot. And this is one of ways that I think about how we understand the world at present. This is a couple of pages from a book called Weather Forecasting by Numerical Processes. It was written by a meteorologist called Lewis Fry Richardson. It was published in 1920, but he actually developed the theory during the First World War. Fry Richardson was a pacifist. He was a Quaker, and so he worked on his mathematical theories of the weather while he was carrying stretchers. He was an ambulance driver, a conscientious objector in the First World War. But he figured he could do something that no one had done before, which is that he could model the weather as mathematics. He could write equations. And by breaking down the map of the world into these little squares, he could apply mathematics to the observed characteristics, temperature, pressure, wind speed, and so forth, in order to be able to then perform a mathematical calculation to move the weather forward in theory, and therefore be able to predict it, which was an extraordinary idea at the time, particularly because they didn't have computers. Fry Richardson did all this work with pen and paper. In fact, he actually did it sometimes while shells were exploding around him in the war. He believed in the method, and he did do it with pen and paper, but he also thought it was a kind of crazy idea because there was no way maths would work fast enough to move faster than the weather itself. He called it a dream. And it actually took it took around 30 years for computers to, well, first be invented, and then to be able to do mathematics in the way that Fry Richardson imagined. This is his mathematics transposed into the form of a computer program. This does exactly the same thing. It takes weather, temperature, humidity, and so on, the observed characteristics of the weather, transforms them into mathematics, and runs them faster. And this was first done on a computer called the ENIAC in 1945. And that was the first time that humans ran a computer faster than the weather itself. So it was able to create a model of the world that outstripped reality, that ran faster than the world itself. And this for me is a really key moment in history the history of computers, in the history of technology, and also in the history of the way we think about the world. This was the computer that it ran on. This was a computer called the ENIAC, which was one of the very, very first computers, the first programmable computer. And it performed this mathematical calculation of the weather in 1945. The first time it did a 24-hour calculation of the weather in 23 and a half hours. So just very slightly faster than the world itself. But it kind of proved this point, that it was possible by gathering enough data about the world, by chopping down the world into kind of small observable units, turning into mathematics, you could predict the future. And so much of the 20th century and our contemporary thinking comes out of this idea that we can transform the world into numbers, run it through computers at increasing speeds, and therefore be able to predict and in some ways control the future. So that's the kind of background to what I call something called computational thinking. And computational thinking is that belief, not just that we can use computers to think, but in some way the world is like a computer, that the world belongs to this kind of mathematical thinking. And anything that doesn't fit into the maths kind of falls out the side. I want to talk about a couple of the unintended consequences of that. One of them is the fact that computers like this, which were whole rooms, have collapsed down into, our kind of smartphones. And we think of computing now as something very small. But in fact, computing has covered the entire planet in the form of the internet, in the form of all these networks, even in satellites. So now actually, instead of, going into a room like this to be in a computer, the whole world is a computational device. And it runs hot. Computers, particularly computers that scale to run the internet, huge data centers filled with thousands and thousands of machines all over the planet, they require huge amounts of electricity to function. And in so doing, they create huge amounts of greenhouse gases, of CO2, of other forms of pollution. And in fact, we're seeing that the computation is a huge contributor to climate change. It's estimated that the global internet infrastructure produces about as much CO2 every year as the airline industry. And actually, that's an out-of-date figure because, of course, during the pandemic, there's much less flying going on and much more people using computers. So in fact, at present, I would hazard a guess that the internet is producing much, much more carbon dioxide than the airline industry even was kind of prior to the pandemic. The effects of this, as we all know, are that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is rising at incredibly dangerous rates. And so the system that we've created in part to model the climate, to predict the weather, is also one of the things that's actively changing it. These processes are deeply connected. And one of the strangest effects of that is it means it's getting harder to predict things. So these are diagrams that show the effects of rising atmospheric temperature, the fact that the air around the Earth is getting hotter. One of the effects of that is it's creating more turbulence in the atmosphere. So here, these show the normal flight paths of passenger jets between Europe and the US. Because of climate change, these flights are getting bumpier. Turbulence in the atmosphere is increasing because of the changes in the temperature of the atmosphere. So in the future, flying is going to get bumpier. But also it means more generally, the weather is harder to predict. We've spent the last century getting better and better at predicting the weather. But precisely because we've been doing that mathematically and using all these computers and building the whole of civilization around this idea of prediction, our ability to predict it is actually getting worse. We're going to know less and less about the future, precisely because we've built all of these machines that were supposed to bring it about and make it easier to control. One of the other strange things about this is, in fact, the parts of our technology that are supposed to be the most intelligent are also, in fact, the most damaging. The way in which we're developing artificial intelligence, for example, is incredibly processor intensive, which means it produces lots and lots more heat. This is an analysis that shows how much CO2 is created by various things, like taking a flight, living your life, driving a car. And the last example is training a neural architecture, a neural network to run an artificial intelligence. This requires so much heat and energy that it outstrips all the other ones entirely. That's how we're building intelligences, literally by warming the atmosphere and consuming fuel. The other half of that that's not often talked about the effects of carbon dioxide is as carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, it actually makes us more stupid. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is currently well over 400 parts per million, but if you're sat in a small room without the windows open, in an office or in your bedroom, carbon dioxide quite often passes 1,000 parts per million. And at over 1,000 parts per million, human cognitive function, our ability to think, drops by 20%. So increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere doesn't just damage the planet, it actually makes us more stupid. And it's the development of AI that is doing that, quite literally and directly. It's also happening in all kinds of other ways. This is an example from YouTube. On the left, you have a video by Walter Cronkite, the veteran US news anchor, talking in 1980 about the effects of climate change. He's being very serious, he's very clear, he's using facts to explain what burning coal is doing to the atmosphere. This is 1980, this is 40 years ago. Now, if you watch that same video on YouTube, YouTube on the right will recommend you a series of videos by people who are denying climate change, who are arguing for more coal, more burning. YouTube is radicalizing people against the truth about climate change, which is a complex of many issues, too much to go into right now, but is also another example for me of artificial intelligence literally making us dumber. You see this effect because it's part of, I should, just to finish that thought, this is another result of prediction. This is YouTube trying to predict what we want to see and getting it horribly, dangerously wrong in a way that's actually, dangerous to all of us. I call this death by GPS. By GPS is a term that was invented by park rangers in the United States. And what it means is that people who have GPS units, the navigation aids in their cars, will follow the bright line on that screen wherever it takes them. They'll trust the instructions of the computer over their own knowledge, their own sense, the evidence of their own eyes, and they will drive their cars into rivers. There have been people found dead in Death Valley in the United States because their GPS has told them to drive into this place, which is dry and inhospitable and deadly, and they've trusted the computer over their own senses. That's the end result of this kind of computational thinking and this belief that computers can predict what's best for us, and us believing that that's the case. I mentioned earlier the way in which mainframe computers have kind of expanded to cover the entire world. They've also shrunk down into these little black boxes. And I think there's really two important things to learn from this. These are my two final points. I'm just about to finish. One is this is what happens when you create black box technologies. This is what happens when we're all surrounded by incredibly complex machines that are shut away inside little boxes that most of us don't have access to or understand. Whether those little boxes are the smartphones that we carry around with us all the time, or huge data centers in the cloud, a huge piece of infrastructure that none of us see and none of us are aware of. So we don't know how it works, and we don't know what the costs of it are. And there's very few ways in which we can find out. And so you get this huge gap in understanding. Even though we live in a time of incredible complex technology, most people have no idea how it works, and so it doesn't have any benefit to their real understanding of the world. And so what's really required is not making more technology better, it's making everyone understand and making that technology accessible so that the real benefits accrue to us. The benefits are not being able to use technology. The benefits are becoming more able to interact with the world around us in better ways. And we do that not by using the technology, but by understanding it. The second effect is what happens, partly as a result of that not understanding how things work, but also particularly kind of believing in this idea of technology as a truth teller, as something which genuinely informs us around the world. And one of the ways I think about this is really, do we actually listen to what technology is telling us about the state of the world? And my example of that is that we have this idea that more information makes things better. If we only had access to more information, we'd all get to some kind of better place. But we've built that. We've spent the last 50 years building a worldwide technological system that allows any of us to access information at any point. But as I said, we've also been locking away the power to understand how that happens into little boxes. The result is a world that's not characterized by better understanding, by more knowledge or education. In fact, we see around us a world that's characterized by division, by increasing fundamentalism, by political polarization, by a kind of rejection, really, of the notion of truth itself. And for me, those things are intimately connected. We have produced immense amount of knowledge while withholding the ability for people to think and understand for themselves from them. And the technologies that we've built, believing that, are continuing that process and making us dumber and less able to understand and less able to access, or rather less able to have our own agency within these systems at all. That's it, really. That's what I had to say. The technology is not about having access to information. It's not about predicting the future. It's potentially about being able to understand how stuff works and use that knowledge for ourselves. And it's that impetus that has to be at the bottom of any kind of technological design. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? So if you can hear me, please raise your hand. ちょっとこちらからの音声が聞こえていないようなので、
Perhaps you are not hearing our audio, but now we would like to move on to the discussion. First, we'd like to have a discussion from participants in Japan. Now, listening to what James had to say, in New Dark Age, he repeatedly maintained very important points. And actually, it is very difficult to summarize in a point. But this session for understanding the society because of the technology like internet and smartphones, technology had spread. And computational thinking, he mentioned. And there was the thought, like computational thought, when thinking about the complex issues facing us. It was thought to be a magical technology. But James said it's not the case, actually. Computers like machine learning and so forth are affecting the people in terms of bias. And the people are taking those predicted by the technology as a truth or misunderstanding them as a truth. And another big issue is what we should think about now is the very complex issue like environmental issues for which we are not able to find easy solution. For such problems, perhaps this kind of a computational thought, is it really possible for computation to come up with the solution in an easy-to-understand way? Is it possible? And in order to have the computational thought, but computers are accelerating global warming and increasing the CO2 in the atmosphere and damaging people. And people are getting more stupid. And there are such many issues. It's not really things that can be understood by this simple causal relationship, or is it going to be called as a conspiracy? Conspiracy is one of the chapters in the book, and can we summarize this situation as a conspiracy? So I would like to ask Oki-san and Hoshino-san once again. After listening to what James said and the reality that we are facing now, including the complex issues, the issues of evil nature, evil or good, well, as Jacques Rousseau mentioned, that the dichotomy of kind of a thinking cannot be applied to the reality. So what kind of approach will be the solution potentially going forward? That is my first question to you. Oki-san, Professor Oki, can you please respond? Okay, let me start. So in the order of presentation, perhaps. Oki-san, you are the first. Well, it was very interesting, and your presentation was very intriguing. I think it is very complex and a difficult issue. First of all, I am a historian, so there are things that I would like to mention. For instance, not being able to understand each other or a kind of a conspiracy. It's not something that has emerged suddenly out of the blue. For example, the United States became independent in 1770s. And actually, there was the speculation about conspiracy a lot, to the effect that, according to the religion, the people were not able to say this is the thought by the God. And politically speaking, there were a lot of people who believed in conspiracy. But somebody is trying to conspire in order to trap us. And many people are saying that to each other. So that was the beginning of the modern history. That was the concept in history. And to the contrary, why are we seeing this as a problem suddenly now? In the past, the conspiracy, or maybe people could conceal conspiracy in a good manner without being known. by other people. So why are we so intrigued by this theory of conspiracy? Because of the ability to be able to check conspiracy? Well, this is the position maybe. I am not a believer in technology, but looking at the materials in history, many people have made mistakes, and these could not be verified soon. So many people who do not really know are writing papers, and I thought that this is the way the world goes on. And nowadays, people are connected to each other, and people started to be surprised. I think it is a new phenomenon. I think new way of understanding today's world is emerging. I don't think my thought is consistent in the context today, but Jean-Jacques Rousseau, for the benefit of his prestige, and he is based on the dichotomy, but he is not believing in the dichotomy, but he is very sensitive to what people are not able to understand each other. He was a celebrity, so he was misunderstood, and he was suffering from the fake news, speculation, or rumors. I'm digressing a little bit, but anyway, well. So the world has been understood, so that's why we are getting interested in this not being able to understand each other. This is my question.
問題というか非常に大事だと思う。
What is important is that not being able to mutually understand. The people in the past did understand that difficulty as well. Well, having listened to the experts' views, I think the experts, some of them have a fear of being wrong. For example, that there are those people who believe in their own argument, but even with accumulated knowledge, but there are those still people who believe that may go wrong as well. I think COVID-19 has revealed the difference between those two groups of experts. So I think grasping the surrounding situation, I wonder if there is any major difference between today and the past. I think the people and experts in the past, those competent people, were able to mutually understand each other. But that is the impression I have. But there are also those people who blindly believe in their own arguments. In the 18th century, there are those experts who believed in their own discoveries and blind-minded, and that they revenge on those who were against those professionals. But what makes today different from those days is that the immediate situation is completely different. For example, dropping tweets in the Twitter, they didn't have this kind of a tool, and so they were not able to understand each other, and there were a lot of illiterate people in large numbers, and they were living in that kind of world. Thank you very much.
Professor Hoshino, could you please make comments? Well, my comment may be related to what both of you have mentioned. As Professor Oki said, the lay people versus expert. I was very much interested in that part. And I think many of you know this. The expertise culture is correlated very much with this. So this is not a new problem or issue. We're based on the past history of the disciplines, and there has been a discommunication between experts versus experts and lay people. So when it comes to the roles to be played by science communicator, I think such roles are increasing in importance since some time ago, and non-expert or lay people and expert communication must be mediated by those people who play such role. And your presentation reminded me of that. And in Professor Oki's presentation between the non-expert or lay people and experts, and both parties need to have some level of modesty or humility. And So attitude shown by the non-expert when they listen to what experts have to say, and experts, they are based on scientific evidence. Based on the fact that they are based on evidence, they need to have some critiques or critical evaluation of the fact that they believe they are based on the scientific evidence. I think these are the things that we have to revisit, and this is my candid feedback to your presentation. With the time constraint, this is my comment. Thank you.
Hoshino-san.
Now, at the time of the presentation given by Professor Shimizu, the embedded thinking, I think corporality is something that is missed all across the world, and that is because of the expansion of algorithm. I think I wonder if there is any possibility of bringing back corporality into this process. I think I may be too in the direction of middle of the road approach. I think it is one thing to talk about corporality, the AI-related computation. That kind of thinking is important, but at the same time, corporality is also very important. But if you're going to go extreme in that direction, that is not wise enough, because it is going to mystify corporality. Therefore, I think what is necessary is to balance those approaches. Based on Professor Kubota's comments, what does corporality actually mean? It is going to be important to identify that.
Professor Oki, do you have any comments as a follow-up to what Hoshino-san mentioned? Yes, I was intrigued very much by what you said, Professor Hoshino. I think way of thinking is greatly different. Perhaps I am in the paradigm of concentration. I am dragged into a concentration paradigm. Your story has reminded me of that. So corporality, but I think that the concentration and the distraction sounded a lot with me. Distraction, I think we have to specify this, and also corporality embodiment as well. So regarding the corporality, maybe I'm digressing from your topic, but I would like to talk about gender issue. Rather, for example, the hobby is encouraged for women to practice, and I think that immersion is not a hobby recommended to women. For example, I am a nerd, and I tend to be immersed. Well, I think this is how my brain works, and I don't want to have other people talking to me while I am immersed. And in the past, people did not like girls to be immersed, and hobbies recommended for women using hands and doing some sewing work. So when some people talk to you, and then the women are expected to look back to respond to him. But I am different. I am just concentrate or not concentrate at all, 1 or 0. So using the body to be connected with people around you, I think this is not something done by minority or women alone, but rather this is something to be evaluated by everyone. In that practice, I hope that embodiment, for example, in the handcraft, sewing, you use the body, a part of the body, which is hands. What is it? And I thought that this should be evaluated by people around me. Sorry about this distraction.
Well, in terms of distraction, it can be regarded as multi-focus as well. That means the multiple approaches with concentration. And I think that can be termed in that way as well. I think our voices have not reached Mr. Bridle, so I asked him to say the last words, and if that is understood by Mr. Bridle, I would like to ask Mr. Bridle to say a few words. and then the closing remarks by Mr. Nanjo. We only have several minutes to go. Well, sorry, unfortunately, Jameson is now in Greece. In fact, there was no smooth connection, and so maybe on a different occasion we would like to invite him and to say more words. Now, we have run out of time, and we are getting closer to the conclusion. We tried to focus on specific matters, but since we are going to have a long run all the way for the 2 weeks, and so first we decided to globalize the talk. So, Mr. Nanjo, would you please share with us some impressions on the talk? What I have recognized is that with regard to understanding, there is demand for more diversity in society. With more growing diversity in society, I'm wondering whether people can mutually understand. In order to manage this, I think the only method is a democracy. That is the general people's conviction. But there are a lot of people around the world who do not believe in democracy. So in light of that, we are facing the world that is in confusion with the progress of technologies, new emerging technologies, and for example, that we are going to have new potentialities. And as Mr. Bridle presented in his remarks, it would create a lot of difficulties as represented by the term New Dark Age. So at the end of the day, what should we do? And I wanted to ask this question, as a matter of fact, of Mr. Bridle. In the end of his book, as you wrote, Mr. Kubota, in the postscript, that we have to keep thinking, and we have to revise our way of thinking, and we have to continue with thinking. And that was the last and concluding sentence. So that means his message is to continue to think. Right. What is being emphasized is that in order to think, a new metaphor is essential. If I may share with you one good example, how to grasp information. In the past, when it comes to information, it was believed as a new oil for the new age. It is the engine for driving the new world. And that was the metaphor that was given to it. But instead of that, another metaphor is that information is like radioactivity. So it is invisible. So once it is out in the society, it is not eliminated. It cannot be eliminated. So Hoshino-san, you were talking about categorization, and according to Kant, understand, you used the term in the understanding. So the metaphor for understanding, we always have to renew that concept going forward. And that is the gist of what the book argued for. Based on that, that is the very reason why we are being engaged in this forum.